I'm going to talk about basically about you being, like, I'm assuming most of you are engineers, and I'm sure some of you at some point has thought about having, about sort of what would it be to become product manager. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, sort of trying to give you some tastes and insights and warnings and encouragements if you want to delve into it. So I myself, just a little bit about myself, I'm actually still an engineer. I consider myself an engineer, although most of my career I spent in product companies, and most of my roles in product companies involved were at least kind of part-time on the side product managers, and sometimes more than 50%. But I was never, just to be clear, I was never 100% product manager. I could never let go of the engineering part, which is kind of like, I'm guessing a lot of you would have similar kind of issues as well. It's the product management has got some. I'm calling it the ugly truth, but it's not that. It's not that it's ugly, but it's actually quite different to engineering work. I'll talk a bit about that. I'll talk about sensemaking. How many of you have heard of the word sensemaking? Just quick. No? Yeah, oh, cool. Okay, you should look it up, read it up a bit about it. The sort of the seesaw between left brain, right brain thinking, and I'll wrap it up with some sort of final thoughts, and feel free to ask me questions. Cool. So let's start. So, okay, which one of these do you think really matter? Okay, anyone? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all of the above? Maybe? Sorry, I'm not sure if you can read. So there's a whole bunch of, basically there's a whole bunch of things that you can read up on product management and product design, and in general design and management, everything from Agile, Leap, and a lot of different blogs. I would say it's like actually don't rely, like in the end, the decisions are not really coming from any of those, and also do not trust me. So like always keep a skeptical, try to keep a skeptical stance on the whole discussions, because product management is, I think essentially it's very chaotic, very messy. There's no easy way to kind of to learn it without trying, and you'll get better at it if you keep doing it. So the things about product management is that it's open boundary problem. It's not like a closed problem where you can, it's always, you never know if you really solve the problems. You can always expand the problems. You can always reframe the problems. You don't know if you really got it right or wrong. Like there's no exact measurement of doing things. And you hear all these great stories. I mean, there are some people who are really good at it. Like you hear stories about, I mean, everything from Steve Jobs and some people who really were great at it. But then a lot of the other people, I reckon they were just lucky. I mean, I really don't believe that, I don't actually believe that, for example, Facebook was something, I believe a huge amount of luck was involved in Facebook and the timing. A huge amount was luck involved in how Microsoft took off. So not that these guys are bad, but given a different set of circumstances, then would they do exactly the same thing? Probably not, or someone else would have picked it up. So I still maintain a lot of luck and timing, and who you know is actually also influences the thing. So where sort of contrast that to the engineering space, it's very close boundary problem. You know what you're dealing with. Once you have requirements, you know you can, does your software actually satisfy them? You can, if you're like, basically once you know what you're building, you can always test it. That's sort of the definition of good software, that it's testable, and hence, not only that, but mainly with TDD, you need to make sure, it's sometimes good to actually write the test before you write the software. Right or wrong is all good. And there is actually not that much luck involved in software design. Eventually, sometimes you have bad luck occasionally, but then once you actually learn, once you've sort of become good enough at designing software, then the whole luck factor, you can manage it there's always, and it's usually always bad luck, right? You don't get like, oh, this is lucky now, suddenly it's working. It's usually the other way around. But if you know enough of your, once you build your skills, you can manage the risk and all the nasty stuff that comes along with it. And I also wanted to highlight that it's actually not, even stuff like let's put out really beautiful products, really fancy looking products. It's actually not the case. Sometimes very successful products can be ugly. I mean, look at SAP. Anyone used SAP recently? And they're still ugly as hell. They can be, products can be cumbersome. Successful products can be cumbersome. Successful, good, really cool products can be really nice and easy to use. Yeah, there are some successful products that can be using really dodgy technology and I know a few, like even at PayPal, for example, there was in the US, PayPal bought a company called Venmo, and the Venmo was originally built on Python, and it caused a huge amount of issues, but it was super successful. And people were fighting fires on a daily basis, but it was still, and eventually got, I think most of the Python code is now rewritten. You don't want to use Python for backend services stuff. But anyway, it's like you can build all really great technical products and still, they can fail. So really, yeah, the successful products, it depends on how fast you can grow, what are you going to focus on, well, what is the stuff that you really needs to be fixed. So essentially all software is, all software has issues. There's virtually very little software that has, or when it has issues, usually they're hidden. If you're really good, you try to hide most of it behind the scenes so that people are not aware of it, but all software has issues. So how do you focus your energies into fixing issues that actually matter, as opposed to fixing issues that don't matter that much? So the worst thing that you can do, especially as a startup, is wasting energy. You have so little chance to actually make it through. Any sort of wasted energy is likely to kill you. And you have to make money on the side or raise money. If you're a startup, you have to make sure that the money actually keeps flowing in one way or the other. So yeah, now it's not uncommon that for some products or platforms to take 10 years to actually be profitable, to make money. Say, for example, Uber. They're nowhere even near profitable and still massive valuation. So it's not, you don't need to be, I wouldn't say profitable, but you still need to make sure that there's enough money to fuel the whole development and growth. And that's really it. And then, yeah, even as a product manager, you kind of have to, these are some of the strategic decisions that product management is not just, so there's two sides of it. There's the actual building the software, but there's also deciding what to build, what sort of features to build, how to do it versus competition. The whole, marketing and product management are really intertwined, and you have to, some of these things have to be, the way that you will build software needs to be influenced by some of the big decisions. Do you want to go just put out the user engagement like Facebook did? Basically, Matt Zuckerberg said, hey, just put something out there. We don't even know what it is yet. Just sign up users, and then eventually we'll figure out what to do with it. So that's actually perfectly fine in many cases. Just build the engagement, build the user base, and look for money later on. You have to worry, of course, about the cost of building the product and how you're going to fund it all. The cost of information, like sometimes as a product manager, you say, hey, I really want to know all of this stuff before I make a decision. But then the cost and the time to get the information, that can kill you as well, because if you take too long, or if you're going to spend too much time on research, that can kill you as well. So there's all these trade-offs you have to make. There is no right or wrong. You have to make a trade-off between making decisions now, between putting off some of these decisions until you have more information later on. Opportunity cost as well. It's like, do you want to, you try to build something, and then if you actually build the wrong thing, then there's the opportunity cost of what you could have done if you had built something else. And that's really the summary. It's ambiguity, uncertainty. You have to be able to live with it. And it's not, I think this is the big thing for engineers. Engineers are used to certainty. Engineers are inherently uncomfortable with uncertainty, like most engineers that I know. And this is why you see maybe in your careers, you will see people early on, they kind of tend to veer towards, oh, they're really good engineers, and then really good marketers, product engineers, stalkers, BS artists, and all this stuff. So people have got different affinities, and I think that sort of the level of comfort with uncertainty is an important thing that if, as an engineer, you really want to get into product management, you almost have to reprogram yourself a little bit to be more comfortable with all of that and not let you get to it. And you still have to make decisions. You can't let yourself paralyze. So a big thing that I wanted to talk to you, and this is just like an intro, you should Google it a bit more about it, is this Sensemaking. And these are really, you can see for yourself the definitions, but Sensemaking is really, it's an inherent human thing that when you see stuff around you, you try to make sense of it. Okay, that's the short words. But people have this ability, like people are not, this is why I don't think that machine learning and artificial intelligence are really anything close to humans, because people have this innate ability to make sense out of things that are happening in the world without any real inputs. People are already trying to somehow figure out when stuff are happening, how do you relate that to everything that you've learned as a kid, everything that you have in your genes and all of that. So I think as people grow, the kids are actually really amazing at it, because the kids that do it, they have no data. They have very little data to start with, little training data. So they have to actually sense-make themselves all the time. And they're super happy at it, and they're really good at it. And then I think somehow as people grow up, they tend to lose a little bit of that, especially if you're in very hard sciencey kind of, and very, I think some of the education systems which are all over the world kind of very, you shall learn such and such things, so they're very prescriptive. Some of this also I think hurts people. So sense-making is this other ability to actually make sense of people make sense of things in very confusing situations. And even, for example, some of this stuff, when you read about it, it's quite interesting. Even people in military, in armies, they have to actually, especially some of the more elite units, they actually use this to figure out how to learn on the fly and still operate in unfamiliar circumstances. So why is really sense-making important? Because unlike the typical approaches where you have to kind of okay, here's your problem, and you gather it, analyze, create a criteria for selection, scoring, and implement. This is like a very methodical process. In the end, the real issue is you can be focused on wrong problems, and all your effort is wasted. So sense-making is kind of like just trying to broadly differentiate between the two lines of thinking. It's kind of like, it can be circular, holistic, fuzzy, whereas the analytical thinking is quite sort of linear in a way. Context is really important as opposed to analytical thinking. It's quite subjective, biased, but it has some sort of meaning. People can relate to it. Or analytical, like when I say objective but lacks meaning, is like the meaning is more kind of like what people relate to it more emotionally. So if just hard facts without something to relate to in a more emotional, primitive way is kind of like, it basically loses meaning. And the other good thing about the sense-making mode of the mind is you can actually operate very well in very ambiguous and unusual circumstances, whereas sort of the analytical thinking tends to break down. And the problem with sense-making, again, you can be spectacularly wrong or contradictory and all of this kind of illogical things, but the problem with analytical thinking, you can be useless or just irrelevant. You can be like 100% correct and totally useless and irrelevant. Yeah. So which one is it? Do you need the one? Do you need the other? It's really both. As you need to basically kind of learn how to leverage your analytical skills. And that's what I call the seesaw. You can just have to seesaw between the two. One moment you have to really be thinking right brain, then switch to the left brain. Make sure that you kind of keep your crap in check, that you're not like, basically you have kind of like a marketing silly person in the right side and then really hard scientist on the left side, and you have to do a lot of ping pong between the two. And what I reckon would take to really make you a Jedi in this is the sort of cultivation is kind of like, you can't force it, you just have to, it's more, it's kind of like cultivation of different, you want to learn a lot of different kind of stuff, not just sort of, maybe lay off some of the programming stuff and learn a lot about all the other interesting social and semi-social things like economics, which is really funny science, not even a science. Sometimes life experiences, I think they change, transform people, especially hardship and personal relationships, and when you have kids and when you lose people as well, it's really important that some of these experiences actually give you more kind of rounded way of thinking about things. Self-knowledge, as you tend to sort of get older, hopefully you know more about yourself. You are more aware of yourself, and you can talk all the meditation and mindfulness crap and all of that stuff. And you have to also be very forgiving to yourself to say, okay, a lot of times you make mistakes and you just have to just roll with it. Literally, you have to stop criticizing yourself for making mistakes, because in the end, that's the only way to move forward. You have to also be able to focus and figure out how to minimize distractions, such as social media and all that crap. So sort of figure out, because again, you kind of, if you are too much into sense making, you can lose focus, which is not good as well. So you kind of have to also be quite mindful of all of your thoughts and make sure that you just keep moving forward and don't worry about perfection. Drop some of your technical perfection standards for product management. It's not going to work. And if you really become a Jedi, you'll probably be the first one ever. So let us know how it actually works. I want to talk to you a little bit about keeping their stuff real, right? So this is more going back to the analytical side. So like a lot of the time, design thinking people, and there's an interesting lecture called Design Thinking is Bullshit. It's like, okay, I don't think it's bullshit, but a lot of people kind of go with design thinking and it becomes super fluffy and it becomes nothing, a big nothing cloud. So to really keep it, you have to put something out there, something which is real, and then criticize it. You can't don't keep it fluffy and real, and make sure that the ideas and concepts you put out of there from your sense-making perspective are actually, you can articulate them well enough so that you can criticize them. Otherwise, they're just fluff. And you have to produce these ideas. You have to produce them. You have to be thick-skinned as well. You can't let criticism of the ideas affect you as a person. You just need to churn out as many of them as you can, and then criticize them. Again, this translates into the software as well. So whatever you put out there, you always have to be thinking how I'm going to actually get the feedback. There's a lot of UX design where you put people in rooms and you get some feedback. But in the end, that's kind of like I see a lot of issues or shortcomings with the approach. You really have to put it out there to the real world, and you have to always think how you're going to instrument and figure out whether people use it, how they use it, what other assumptions you need to be tested. And don't worry about originality. It's really originality. The sort of the older I am, the less I care about originality. It's like so many ideas are not original. Steal from everyone, and whatever your original ideas are probably not that original. You may have subconsciously borrowed them. So just actually steal other ideas, improve them, and it's all good. I mean, yeah, don't steal IP, because you can end up in a bad situation, but otherwise it's good. And ideas are really cheap, so it's really, you have to put in a lot of effort into building good products. Yeah. I wanted to highlight some of the common engineering traps. A lot of engineers we like shiny stuff, and we chase after gimmicks. A gimmick is something that people will use for a short while, then they'll get bored with it, right? And these gimmicks are, occasionally they can be useful to put some gimmicks in your products, but you have to recognize them as gimmicks. So unless some features, whatever you build are actually useful, then people will stop using them eventually. So don't chasing gimmicks is a very tricky thing. And a lot of people, I mean, this is me as well. Like I wasn't able to give up engineering, but at the same time, you have to be mindful. If your product manager is such a demanding job, you really don't have much time to care about. Like you shouldn't have that much time to care about your engineering stuff because the problem is never fixed, the problem is not defined. If you invest time in engineering, you're not going to invest time in product management, meaning that you are not doing the full, you're not doing the product it deserves. Sometimes engineers like to chase hard problems because, oh, it's a challenging problem, let me work on it. Oh. Whereas as a product manager, we should be thinking, no, this is a hard problem, I want to actually chase a simpler problem. I want to try to simplify this problem or work around it instead of actually giving myself an intellectual challenge. Drunkard search principle, it's like there's a drunkard and loses the keys and then searches for the keys where there's light as opposed to where the keys are supposed to be. So a lot of the time people kind of like it's just like you try to do something which is comfortable even though you actually know subconsciously it's not the right thing to do. So again, get out of your comfort zone. You have to push yourself for that. Don't analyze too much. I mean, analyze for a short while, time box it, and then make decisions. You can't let analysis just take over forever. This is everyone. It's like, oh, you invest a lot of time in certain ideas or features or products, and then you can't let go of them because it's your baby. Well, no, it's like you have to also be able to cut losses. And the same thing is in investment economics and a whole bunch of other things. Like you have to recognize when these are just ideas, these are the things, it's not you, it's not really your baby as in person, it's just stuff that you need to let go eventually. And don't optimize things in a very tunnel vision way. You always sort of have to look left and right, up and down as a product manager. Like you can optimize, when you're an engineer, when you have a very well-defined problem, you can optimize the hell out of it. In product management, you always have to make sure that to look left, right, up and down. And don't worry about being an imposter because everyone is an imposter, I reckon, in product management. It's all, yeah, there's no real hard science. Just go for it. And the other thing is to keep in mind, you're not like, use your network. You have good engineers where you can, so good engineers, they know how to reach out to their whole bunch of networks, everything from Stack Overflow to their friends and peers, and it's always easy to sort of say, oh, there's this technology, I need to know a bit more about it. And as well, good product managers, they need to sort of keep in touch with a whole bunch of different people so that it's those unknown unknowns, the things that you're not even aware of, that they can bite you eventually. So you really want to, discuss things with a lot of other people, keep it open, talk to people. Yeah, don't be an island. And just want to throw you this thing. It's actually really old, the 16 Thinking Hats. It's a very good way of sort of structuring that thought process of looking at being like a really super optimistic, just churn out ideas to then criticize them to then move on to the next step. So it's actually quite a good thing of using collaboration as in a group of actually moving things forward. And lastly, make sure there's a clock there. Time is always limited. Make sure you always time box yourself. You know when you need to make decisions and how you need to make decisions. Don't believe me, don't believe even yourself. Always keep a critical eye on everything. You want to also try don't try to make sure that you have always some sort of a plan B, plan C, plan D option. Don't try to put your eggs in the same basket because there's so much uncertainty. It's always good to hedge your bets. And finally, own your decisions, right? So you can do all the research, you can go to all these conferences and look at the data and look at expert opinions, but own your decisions. Make sure that when you make mistakes, that you really own them, and then so that next time if you don't own your decisions, then you're not actually going to improve that much. You're always going to hide behind other people's data or opinions or best practices. So always put it upon yourself to actually to to be the owner of all of your actions. And in the end, like, there's no other way to become a product manager than to actually do it. This is all talk. So if you have some ideas, do it yourself, put it out there. If you don't even have much capacity, maybe you can get some Odesk people to do it for you. Just make sure you always know that you're probably going to fail. You're not going to make much money, but you're actually going to learn through it. And that's it. And enjoy the ride. That's pretty much it. Any questions? Yes?
As a product manager, how do you decide which features become part of you?
That's like the really hard question, and there's no right answer, right? So, okay, how do I decide? So a lot of it is, firstly, you always start with what are the problems that you're solving for other people. So you always need to solve some problems for other people, right? So you always try to put them in their shoes and see how does it really solve their problems? A lot of intuition is involved because you can't interview thousands of people. Like, you can interview maybe 20 people and get some sort of idea. You can do your market research and get some sort of idea. But again, combination of intuition, talking to your friends, talking to people doing research. Then you have to look at your competition, see what other people are doing. You could have great ideas, but then there's, competition is really, really rife. Unless you're into some very niches, that competition is going to be there. So you have to decide how you're going to differentiate yourself, either by doing this or by that. And then the last comes the pricing in the end. So it's a lot of hard things. It's really a multidimensional problem. And, there are some high-level steps that you can take, but it's not a linear process. It's always back and forward. So you have to always make sure that when you try to get all the dimensions right, and then you have some sort of MVP. And even then, it's basically you try to test it out there, try to find ways of testing your assumptions, both before production and after productions. Yeah.
So one of the slides you talk about, like, your product doesn't need to be beautiful to be successful. So it comes down to the growth.
Look, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for SAP style screens, right? I'm just saying that you can put in all this effort into beauty, and a lot of people do, but sometimes beauty is, superficial. Sometimes ugly products that actually bring real benefits to people. Like in Singapore, you throw something, a $5 promotion, and suddenly everyone will come. They don't so sometimes people, beauty is important, but it's not the end of it all. If you're selling to corporate customers, it's really not. Like, this is why SAP succeeds, because corporate customers don't care about beauty. People who decide on the purchase, they don't care about the beauty of the screen. So it's know your context and know where to focus on, right? People tend to always come in with, oh, it's really important for a product to be beautiful. And the answer is sometimes it is, sometimes it's not.
So I want to sort of focus on the other part that you mentioned about growth versus competitor, and like fix your crap as quickly as possible.
Yeah. It's actually not as quickly as possible. Focus, know what crap, try to figure out what crap is important to fix, and there's going to be always tons of crap you're not going to be able to fix. You always postpone or you have to deal with it.
I can see some relationship with some of the improving practices like CIC. So
yeah.
As a product manager, you can influence them, or maybe you can work.
I think really good product, that's one of the benefits of having an engineering background. A lot of product managers without engineering background, they tend to think of, oh, it's a technical issue, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to worry about technical debt. I think it is important for product managers to worry about technical debt, because if you don't understand the technical debt, it's going to bite you. Sooner, it's maybe not now, maybe not this year, maybe not even next year, but eventually it's going to bite you. Sorry, it's a hard answer. It's a hard topic. We can have a chat offline. Cool. All right. Thanks, guys.